Oh, you got her, dude. She's down. Let's go.
Dude, I just shot a deer of a lifetime.
Freaking smoked him.
One with nature, and if you're a believer, one with God.
Definitely gets your heart pumping. Boy, you are in trouble.
Fall Obsession Podcast.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another Fall Obsession Podcast episode. Our Fall Obsession Podcast is driven by Ridge Rock Hunt Company, and I will give them a shout out at the end in our sponsor segment. I'm Sam with Fall Obsession. I'm your podcast host, and I am super excited to be in person with our guest for this week. If you guys have listened to the podcast, you know it's my favorite way to record, and spending a few days down here in Texas with our Midwestern Regional Staff Coordinator, Todd Sellon. Welcome back to the podcast, Todd.
And Sam, I'm so excited to be here with you. You know, I'm super grateful to have this opportunity to come down and visit you, and I'm glad this whole process worked out. And you know, just for the viewers and people listening, Sam and I have communicated several times, many times over the last few years, you know, via text, email, you know, Zoom meetings, that sort of thing. But this is the actual first time we got to meet in person.
Yeah.
And I can verify for everybody, he's just as pretty in person as he is on your screen. So, there is no digital editing here. So,
Well, that's the first time I've been called pretty.
He's blushing through those handlebars now.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, it's, you know, we've talked about so many times in the past couple days that you've been down here, and we'll get into all that and, you know, what we've been up to down here today on this episode. But I looked it up because we were talking before the podcast, you know, how long you've been a part of the Fall Obsession team and everything like that, and we couldn't remember if it was 17 or 18. I'm looking up here on your profile, it's 2018 was the year that you joined, and then we got Heather to come on board a couple years ago as well, you know, with you at the same time, your wife.
And the funny thing is, she was actually part of the process before she actually became an official member, because she's an English teacher.
Yeah.
And so when I would write articles and submit content that way, Heather, you need to edit this. Can you do some proofreading for me, and so on and so forth. So she's informally been a part of the process since I began, really. So
yeah. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. Well, we had Heather on the podcast for episode 112 to kind of talk about you know, kind of her journey as a hunter, and then, you know, that into being a wife, a mom, a teacher, a coach, all that stuff at the same time, and how she juggles all that. It's a really good podcast, and you know, for our listeners or viewers, go back and listen to 112 if you haven't done that.
And for me to listen to it, you know, I sat here and listened to with you yesterday, just to hear her, how confident she is now. Man, it made me so proud. And you know, she's always been very supportive for me and what I wanted to accomplish as an outdoorsman. And to hear that she's gaining that confidence now is just amazing. I'm just so proud of her, and you know, it made me feel good inside.
Yeah, absolutely. It should for you for sure.
Yeah.
So getting into like what you're doing here, man, because we're down here at my place down here in Texas, recording podcasts in person, which is freaking awesome. But you're from Michigan.
Yep.
You're the Midwest staff coordinator. So you and you have been on the podcast before, but virtually. For episode 97 and 98 with that whole Midwestern crew that you have out there.
Yep.
After y'all's Missouri snow goose hunt, which again, another couple of great episodes our listeners should go back and listen to. That whole Midwestern crew is one of my favorites to hang out with and listen to, because you know, just a good group of people for sure. A good group of outdoorsmen and women. But you're down here in person now.
Down here in person.
How did all this happen? How did we get here?
The funny thing is, you know, Sam contacted me. I think you sent me a text and said, "Hey, I want to get Heather and yourself on a podcast independently, so separately." And I said, "Okay, yeah, no problem at all." And I'm a teacher as well, so I've been off of school since beginning of June, and we go back about a month from now. So really, you know, my work in the summer involves doing chores, keeping the farm running, and then just, you know, having fun when I can. And when you mentioned something about the podcast, the first thing in my mind was, Sam has mentioned in the past that his favorite podcasts are those that he does live. And I thought, geez, I have time right now. Why not fly down and do a live podcast with him? And so here we are. We worked it out, and I was able to fly down, and here we are. So.
Yeah, it worked out. Todd, you sent me a text, and hey. Well, first off, there was confusion when we recorded Heather's because I was knocking out several consecutive in that day. We do that with our schedules because we all, like yourself, we all work other full-time jobs outside of Fall Obsession. So it's not uncommon for me to sit down one day and record 2 or 3 episodes and have a few weeks publications, stacked up and everything like that. And long story short, I had 3 lined up that day, and I thought you and I were doing the one right after Heather's, but you were at the fair.
Yep, yeah. So Heather did her podcast. I helped her get set up. I go, okay, Heather, I'm taking the kids. We're going back to the fair. It was fair week at home. So, and our girls had horses at the fair. And so I grabbed the girls. We went to the fair, and we were sitting around the camp, and Sam texted me, okay, I'm done with Heather now. I'll get you on here in about 5 minutes. And I thought, oh, boy, I'm sitting in the middle of a fair, at the campground. How am I going to do this? So in my mind, I was playing out, I got friends that live close. Maybe I can jump on their Wi-Fi at their house and we can do the podcast. But that's when I ended up calling Sam and said, actually, Sam, I'm at the fair right now. What if, and I think that's when I broke it to you, what if I just come down there and do it live?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we worked out a few days. I took a shift off work, and then, you're coming down here. So it's like, well, if you're coming down here for a few days, we might as well go try to hunt some hogs.
Yeah, that was awesome.
So, and that's kind of what we're going to get into today is talking about your first Texas hog hunting experience down here with us on the Texas dirt property that our returning viewers and listeners are no doubt familiar with. But I mean, that's what happened. You flew in, what was it, day before yesterday? Monday, yeah, flew Monday. And
Monday morning, afternoon here.
Got here around midday Monday, and we gradually made our way out there to the lease for an evening hunt, and we're planning to hunt an evening and stay the night and then hunt morning, which was yesterday morning, and then come back. And it was hot. I warned you about the heat, but
it certainly was not like Michigan in terms of the heat. It's a great weight loss program. Anybody, if you're looking for a weight loss program, I recommend Texas Heat. It's a perfect weight loss program. As I sit here right now and look out the windows, I think I've dropped 5 pounds already, even though we're in the AC heat. But you look outside, and it's hot.
Oh yeah. So, but we got out there a balmy 112 degrees when we got out there, but. From your perspective, tell us a little bit about getting out there and driving out, actually getting onto the Texas dirt property, and kind of your initial thoughts and impressions as we made our way into an evening hunt out there.
And first of all, my goal for coming down is just to do the live podcast. I had no expectation whatsoever to go on a hog hunt. So when you offered the hog hunt, I'm like, oh, heck yeah, that's something that I've always wanted to do. I've always wanted to hunt, feral hogs out in the wild. In Michigan, you don't. You got a better chance of seeing Bigfoot than you do feral hog. We just don't have them in Michigan. So I've hunted hogs in the past, but I've hunted them on game ranches. So it's a little different experience. I have hunted hogs in the wild. I went on a hog hunt in Alabama one time. It was just a one-day hunt, and I never saw a hog. So I thought this would be a great opportunity for me to get to be able to see a hog in its environment, in the wild, and who knows what happens from there. As we were driving up to the property, I mentioned to Sam several times, man, I used to have Dish Network, and we had the Outdoor Channel and all those other sportsmen's channel, and they would film out of Texas, and this is the exact landscape that stuck out in my mind. That's something that I always envisioned myself going on a hunt, whether it was for an exotic or a hog or a whitetail or whatever. And that was something that I've always wanted to do. So that's the first thing that stuck out, just the cactus and the mesquite and sagebrush and all that. I thought that was pretty neat. And then we got out there, and of course, you had mentioned the heat, and you mentioned to me several times, the heat's going to be different. It's not going to be like Michigan. However, I also said to Sam afterwards, yeah, it was there. You noticed that it was there. You're sitting there and you're sweating, but it really wasn't a hindrance whatsoever. I didn't think so, because I kind of prepared myself. I have lived down in the south here. I lived in Houston for a year. I lived down in Las Cruces, New Mexico for about a 6-month period, so I understand how hot it can get. So I kind of prepared myself. I was prepared for that, and like I said, the heat never really bothered me. And then we jumped out and started sighting rifles in, which was an adventure.
Yeah, so I had hog hunting down here. A lot of guys like to do it with an AR-15, and I have a new AR build, and I've told you already, obviously, but for the podcast, I had my neighbor take a look at it night before Todd arrived, and we broke it down and made sure everything was in working order and everything. I built it from the ground up, so it's been a long process and adventure for me to get that gun ready to go. And so, but I still need to sight in. I got to talking with my neighbor, and it was dark before we had the chance to sight in at his place. So it was like, all right, well, Todd and I will just do that when we go out there first thing. And one magazine later, we're like, all right, that'll work. It might kill a pig. We'll see.
and we're both archery guys. I'm not saying that we don't rifle hunt or we don't shotgun hunt, we don't muzzleloader hunt, because I certainly do that. One thing I mentioned to Sam, typically when our bow season ends in mid-November and rifle season picks up in Michigan, after the 3 days, you're lucky if you see another buck the rest of the year. And so you almost have to pick up a rifle if you want to give yourself those opportunities to harvest a buck, and even doe for that matter, because at that point the doe typically stay further out, and you just have a difficult time getting them within bow range. So at any rate, so it's not like I'm not familiar with shooting guns. And I know Sam is an archery guy too, and so we're basically in the same boat.
Yeah.
Our focus is archery with limited background experience in rifle shooting and targeting and that sort of thing. So
yeah. So we messed around with this rifle, and this hunt was the first time, and I know with hogs, down here is the one exception, because I talk all the time about how I'm a bow only guy, I only bow hunt. Hogs are the biggest exception, but even then, I don't remember the last time I just hunted hogs with a rifle. So this was my first time to really hunt hogs with a rifle in quite a while. But anyway, all that is to say, we get out there in our first, and all this will be in an episode of season 2 of Texas Dirt, but we get out there and ended up for the first evening, based on the trail cam photos that we'd had weeks leading up into this and kind of the pig activity, we decided that we were going to hunt my bow stand, or where most people saw me spend a majority of my time last year on season 1 of Texas Dirt. So that was the first spot that we were going to set up. My dad and I pulled our blinds at the end of last season because we didn't want to get tore up out there in the summertime, so no blinds. So with pigs, our mentality is just, we're just going to kind of tuck ourselves back in the brush a little bit, wear either camo or neutral colored clothes, but at the same time, you're in camo, I'm in a army green shirt and tan pants, but we're both in shorts, t-shirts, with our boots on and everything, and just kind of trying to tuck back there in the brush. And what we would learn is that we were probably a little bit too close on that set that first night to the food source itself. So
when we got there, Sam went out to check the feeder, and he went to check his camera he had placed out there, and he showed me where he typically sets his bow stand up, and said, hey, let's sit back in there somewhere. And so my thought was, okay, we got to get back in that brush, without realizing, because in my mind I'm thinking a deer can see, a deer can smell, a deer can hear. And not being familiar with hogs, I didn't realize that their biggest sense obviously is smell. They can't see real well, and they can't hear real well. And so my thought was, we got to get back into this mesquite as far as we can. And Sam was like, nope, just put it right on the edge, just plop it right there. And so I was like, okay, we'll see if this works. And that's what I was, obviously I knew it would work because you've had more experience with it. And certainly it was crazy, because as we were sitting there, first of all, as we were sitting there where I just plopped them, Sam and I are just sitting there and just kind of, and we were in the shade, so it wasn't quite as hot, and just sitting there and taking in, everything. I told Sam I was just trying to take everything in that first night and just trying to enjoy being out there on Texas dirt in the Texas landscape. And as I'm sitting there, I feel a little poke on my leg. I'm like, oh, that was a little bug. I kind of brush it off. And a few seconds later, I feel another poke, brush it off. I'm thinking, oh, ticks. At least maybe I got it before it buried its head. And, I can avoid all the diseases that come along with that. But I happened to look down, and my leg is covered with ants. So apparently I set up on an anthill. I didn't realize that. So I jumped up. Sam's looking at me crazy. I'm brushing all these ants off. And then I went and set up at a different spot. I felt like I was like more out in the open, away from the brush a little bit.
Yeah, and in hindsight, we probably could have just taken up a different angle on that clump we were on altogether, instead of kind of trying to make the same spot work just a little differently because of the ants. But I mean, it was what it was at that point. And we were also kind of expecting, again, and even me, being more familiar with pigs down here, was expecting to hear them coming, to hear them working their way in. And at the same time, bigger groups, you can normally hear them coming. Where we were hunting, most of the trail cam pictures were of one or two bigger boars that were traveling either in a pair or just loners by themselves. So, but I still, like in the past, whenever I've sat there and I've had a pig come in, I've heard them before they've come in, crunching through the leaves or the grass, whatever it might be. And so we were a little caught off guard around 8 o'clock when when we actually finally saw one. So
and it has been so dry down here, the grass is just like straw. I mean, you step on it and it's crunch, 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 crunch. You can't be quiet.
Yeah.
And so we were sitting there, and we both got our guns in our laps and just kind of looking around. And I think I was looking behind me to see if anything was coming in. And all of a sudden I hear psst, psst. And I look at Sam, and he's not moving, but he's giving me the
the old arrow.
kind of like what you do when a deer sneaks up on you. I'm like, so I look over, and there is a massive hog 20 yards away just staring at us. He's just staring at us.
Yep.
And that thing looks so huge, And so now we got to be really careful in our movement. We got to be really careful in making noise because he's so close. Even though they can't see real well, even though they can't hear, this guy has pegged. And so my first thought was, we should have tucked back into the mesquite a little bit more, because I felt like I was just right out in the open. And he took a couple steps, then turned and looked at us, and took a couple more steps, and then lifted his head in the air and started smelling. Well, the wind, when we first set up, the wind was perfect. It was blowing away from actually where he came in. But as the evening progressed, we felt it start swirling a little bit. And so both Sam and I felt that the boar got wind of us, because he kept lifting his head and smelling the air.
Yeah.
And took a couple more steps and then turned directly at us, and I thought, oh boy, here we go. We're about to tussle with this massive hog. And then he actually took a couple steps, I think, towards us. And so then he came in really nervous, and then ended up turning and going back towards the feeder. And he was quartering away a little bit, and I remember in my mind, okay, he can't see us, so I got my gun up right away. And Sam was trying to film it, but because of the way he snuck in on us, everything happened so quickly. And because he was so nervous, I felt like he's about ready to run off. Here's an opportunity. So I put it behind the shoulder and shot, and he spun and then took off running. And then Sam asked, how did you react? I said, he just spun and took off running. I didn't know how pigs react when you hit them. I was kind of expecting to hear a squeal and then maybe a kick, like deer. When you shoot deer, a lot of times they kick or they react to it somehow. And I didn't really notice any reaction, or I didn't hear a squeal or anything. He just turned and ran off. So then after a while, Sam and I went down there and we looked, and we couldn't find a single speck of blood.
Yeah.
So,
well, and we were trying to, figure out and analyze it and see what went wrong, what happened there. And, we'll talk more about it later after we mention the morning hunt, but the skin on these things is so thick. So at times it can, if your shot isn't right through the pump house, it can have an effect on your blood trail a little bit. If you're shooting around, you're shooting a 243 hunting rifle is what you were shooting. And not only that, but then he was so close to us when he came out, and when he took the shot, like I was telling you yesterday evening on our couch talk, it was that rifle is zeroed to, 80 to 100 is when is where we sight in at, and now we're shooting something that's 25 yards away.
Yeah.
And again, not gun guys here
No,
at all.
not
So
at all.
if a gun guy wants to comment below and give us more feedback or send something in on the podcast, we're more than receptive to that.
Absolutely.
But my thought is the trajectory of that bullet. My understanding is it kind of angles up and then starts flattening as it reaches out farther.
Yep.
So you're looking at that pig through a scope, and he's filling up that entire scope.
Yep.
You put it right behind his shoulder. My thought, because we didn't see dirt kick up anywhere around him, indicating that it was over or under.
Right.
So my thought is that it was above vitals, kind of in the no man's land. He was quartering away when you shot. Bullet probably lodged in behind that back shoulder blade.
Yeah.
So that's my initial thought.
Right.
And again, no blood. It sucks to talk about that for everybody, but it's the reality of hunting. Is what it comes down to. Stuff like that happens. But
And as he spun and took off running, there you could visibly see that there was no exit wound. So going back to when we were target practicing, Sam had mentioned dirt kicking up. You could obviously tell that when we missed the target, because dirt would kick up behind. And in fact, that's how we were trying to sight the gun in. Well, how far was the dirt kick up? Well, it was beyond the tree. Well, it was in front of that tree. Well, it's so that was a pretty big indicator for us. And like Sam said, I didn't see any dirt like that. He didn't see any dirt like that. The next morning, however, was a different story, and it's a different story altogether. But going back, finishing this one up, we went out and looked for blood for a while, and it makes sense to me the way Sam described it, because I've had that with deer before too. You put a good hit on. However, if you have a lot of fat in it, can close that wound up fairly quickly, and you either have a sparse blood trail or no blood trail at all. And it's just a matter of just doing circles until you find some kind of sign. And we sat for a little bit longer, maybe 10 minutes before sunset, and we just decided, let's just get up and look. And geez, we looked for a good, another half hour, 45 minutes or so, and didn't find a single thing. So I feel like I hit it. Like I said, I'm more of an archery guy than I am a marksman, but I'm pretty confident usually at about 20 to 50 yards, and so I felt like I hit it, but you never know. You can't tell now. So
time and trail cam pictures will tell a better story on that guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I did go to Sam. I go, hey, did you get that in footage? Let's rewind it and see. And he's like, no, it happened so quick I wasn't able to push record. So unfortunately didn't get it on film. So
it's one of those deals, like we were expecting to have time, have a group come in, be focused on the food and have time, and from the very get-go it started feeling more like a deer hunt with the way he was acting. So
for sure, he reminded me of a whitetail. The only thing he didn't do was bob his head and stomp his feet.
So anyway, we finish up the evening there, and at that point it is, we go back to the hotel, we get a few hours of sleep, and then we're heading back out early for the morning hunt. And I was pretty excited about that morning, because it was a new stand. It was one of the newer locations that my dad and I put out last month in June, and set up, and we've been seeing pictures of what we thought was a sow and a couple piglets coming in every single morning, anywhere from as early as 6:30, and I think the latest we saw them come in was around 8:30. So we're thinking, all right, at least a 2.5 hour window, we're probably going to hang out there and more than likely hopefully see them. So it was. And that was a really cool setup too. Like I felt like we were tucked a little bit farther back, and instead of being closer to the food source where we are back farther off of it at 50, 60 yards instead of more on top of it. So I think, and the wind too, not swirling just directly in our face. It was a much better setup for that morning.
And so when we got back to the hotel that night, Sam made a comment to me that if this were a whitetail, I wouldn't get a minute of sleep all night long, just because you try to analyze what you did wrong, or what could I have done better, or what could I change to make sure that the hit was good. And I said to Sam, well, he said because hogs are a nuisance animal, they're an invasive species, we just want to get rid of them. So even if you hit him and he did die and we couldn't find him, at least that's one more invasive species off the property. And I said to Sam, I'm not going to get a second of sleep tonight because I'm going to keep thinking about it. It's just the type of person I am, regardless if it's with a hog out in Texas or a whitetail but in my backyard or a rabbit that I'm chasing all day, and that's just what I do. And so one of the things that I thought of throughout the night was, when I shot at the hog, typically when I shoot I have a shooting stick, and that's just kind of a comfort thing for me. I feel like I'm more stable, I'm a better shot with a shooting stick. This was just kind of, I just raised it, put it on him and shot. So one of the first things that I did when we got out the second morning was I looked for a stick that I could make a makeshift shooting stick out of, and sure enough, I was able to find one, and it certainly helped me put a better shot on the second day.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So we get in there for the second day, and 6:30 rolls by, 7:30 rolls by. We're not seeing anything, and so me as a hunt host, I'm thinking, golly, being my luck, there we're not going to see anything. It's going to be the one morning they don't come in at all, and then same deal as the day before. They pop in. Never heard them coming. Never heard them walking in there. It's just you turn your head and boom,
Right
there they are.
In that morning too, Texas heat wasn't as warm, so it was mid 80s maybe.
Yeah, mid to high 80s probably at sunrise. Yeah.
And in Michigan, mid to high 80s, that's hot. And so, but being down in the heat the day before, it actually felt really nice and really cool. And I don't think I sweat at all during the morning hunt. Our setup was perfect. Like Sam said, we were about 50 or 60 yards off the feeder. Wind was directly in our face. It did not swirl at all. So it was just a perfect setup. And then what was it, about 8 o'clock?
Yeah, few minutes before 8 o'clock, we looked up and there they were.
Yeah.
So.
And again, really not paying attention. Well, we were looking around and just trying to get eyes on the hogs before they came in, and listening, and didn't hear a thing. And so I remember I was posting some content to our page, and I just hit submit. And I hear Todd. And I look up at the feeder. I'm like, oh boy, here we go.
Yeah, there they were.
There they were. So
same group. Well, we thought again, a sow, couple piglets.
very relaxed.
Very relaxed. No idea we were there, so we had time now. Get the camera rolling, and we can kind of game plan and try to figure out, okay, we're both going to take shots here. How's this going to work? So we were able to put that together.
So Sam explains this to me. Again, we weren't talking in a normal voice, but we were able to talk, unlike a whitetail. Even in a whisper, they'll react and respond to. But he was whispering to me and saying, "Hey, here's the plan. I got the camera rolling right now. Let's get our guns up. You take the sow. I'll try to get on one of the piglets. You fire first. After you shoot, then I'll get on one of the piglets and see what happens." And so I got myself ready. Sam was ready to roll. I put the gun right on its back shoulder and squeezed off around with my shooting stick. Squeezed off around. I felt good. A couple seconds later, I hear Sam shoot, and after he shoots, he goes, "Todd, how'd it react?" I go, "Sam, she reacted the exact same way as the one last night, so I'm not sure." I go, "I felt good. I was right on her shoulder." I go, "She just took right off." And he goes, okay. He goes, "I thought I saw dirt behind her." I'm like, oh boy. So that was the sign that we had talked about when we missed the target. You could see the dirt behind the target, and that was the sign that we missed. And so he goes, "Well, let's roll the footage back and see." And so he rolled the footage back and ran it a couple times. He goes, "Yeah, you can see where your bullet hit the dirt behind." I'm like,
yeah, you could actually see point of impact on this pig, which it was like, I mean, square, perfectly midline, right behind the shoulder, like absolutely drilled it. So
so you could see. So what had happened is I had made a great shot on the hog, right through the double lunged him, right through the vitals, and the dirt we saw kick up was the bullet exiting and hitting the dirt and kicking the dirt up. So.
Didn't catch any of that shoulder, just perfect pass through.
Yep.
So, but we review that and walk up there, and we got blood just immediately underneath the feeder. So good sign right from the get go.
So then Sam goes, "I'm gonna go over here and see if I hit that piglet." So he walks over there. He's like, "Todd, think we got a piglet down."
It literally looks like somebody took a paintbrush or a paint roller and just walk through the grass.
Right
it was
up to-
just like you could just easy to follow. You could see it yards in front of you. So
Just a tremendous blood trail, and I can tell you that Sam is he's an archery guy, but he's also a marksman. Holy smokes!
I got lucky, Todd. I got lucky. That's all it was to it.
He had the AR, the rifle that we were struggling to get sighted in, and after I shot all the pigs scattered, including the piglet he shot at. So you're talking the pigs were out 50, 60 yards by the time he got a crack at it. It's probably at about 80, maybe even not really. I think he was more like 80 in this tall brush. So these piglets tend to get lost in the tall brush just because the grass is so high. And dead run, and if you've ever seen a piglet run, man, they scoot.
Yep, all through there.
And Sam smoked it on a dead run, right in the heart.
Again,
Perfect shot.
Pure luck at that distance, and with the rifle setup we had, it was just find when it pops up in the grass and aim for body mass. That's all it was at that distance. So I got lucky, but. So
that was fun, and I didn't even see him because I was tracking the hog I shot at as far as I could. So I was tracking the hog when he shot, so I didn't even see the piglet when he shot. So then after we found yours, we went back and started following the trail for the one I shot at, and just like the night before, we had good blood at first, and then kind of lost the trail a little bit.
Yeah.
And then we kind of did the circle thing, and ended up finding more blood here and there, and ended up taking us right to the hog, laying in some mesquite.
Yeah, we're walking up trying to find it and kind of circling this little patch of brush. The blood's kind of go around the edge, and I think I even said out loud, I was like, "Where is this pig going?" And Todd's like, "It's right there. It's right in the middle of the brush."
Yeah,
there it was, laying dead over there.
Yeah,
so
that was cool. Yeah.
Yep. And then we were surprised too, because then we pull it out and we realize what we thought was a sow and a couple piglets was actually a boar, a young boar, and the piglet, at least the one that I shot, was a young male. Yeah. And I'm assuming the other one probably was as well. So it kind of baffled me there because I wasn't expecting it. You see them on trail cam and everything, and your pig was probably 150 pounds.
Yep.
You see it on trail cams and stuff, and you're like, oh, mom and a couple piglets.
Right.
For some reason, just a little group of the guys hanging out, or little brothers hanging out with big brother, and
right.
Big brother might be trying to get rid of them. I don't know. But
and we were chuckling a little bit yesterday afterwards because just before, while we were making the plan, when the pigs were at the feeder, Sam goes, "Todd, you take the sow. I'll shoot one of the piglets." Okay, so we kind of chuckled. Yeah, Todd, you take the sow, and when you realize it was a boar. So yeah. So.
But yeah, I mean that was. It was a fun hunt, and I'll debunk a couple things on the podcast here for our listeners or viewers if somebody's tuning in and they're not familiar with hog hunting, and they might be asking themselves one of two questions. One being, is a boar good to eat at all? Because that's a very controversial subject down here. And then two, why are you shooting piglets? Why are you shooting young pigs? And when I say piglet, I'm not talking about like, fresh off the hind teat, piglet, but this is a 30-40 pound little pig is what it is. Hogs are such a nuisance down here. They are an invasive species. If you're hunting private land with landowner permission, you don't even have to have per Texas laws, you don't even have to have a hunting license or a tag to kill them. You can kill them any time of the day or night by whatever means. Right. Like that's how adamant Texas is to get rid of these pigs. So they repopulate very quickly. Sows will have 2 to 3 litters a year, and so they can just overtake everything very quickly. And I told you, like, this pig that's now 30-something pounds is more than likely from a spring litter too. Yeah, so that's how quickly they grow too and everything. So
just a few months ago,
yeah. So it's very important just where we're at and the situations we're at, and especially since during the summertime we're only able to get down there to the least once, maybe twice a month in the summertime if we're lucky. It's important to take every opportunity we can to try and get these pigs out of there.
And we actually saw evidence of that later on in the evening. So after we got done with the hogs and we butchered them up and that sort of thing, we were going around the Texas Dirt property checking cameras from your dad's stand and Nick's stand and Nick's dad's stand and that sort of thing. And one of the stands we hit had fencing around the feeder. And I said to Sam, is that fencing meant to keep the hogs out? And he said, yeah, that's meant to try to keep them out, but they still get in. And so later that day, Sam's like, check this out, Todd. And there's a group of 4 or 5 hogs at that feeder.
Yeah, so it's Nick's dad. Robbie is his name. It's one of his stands that he had out there, and he had sent me a text when he knew we were going out there. All of us on the lease are super cool with each other. We don't mind if guys hunt each other's stuff and everything. We're close. And Robbie had sent me a text saying, hey, if you're down there, would you mind checking one of my spy points? It's angled too high up. I need to adjust it down. So we went down there, fixed the angle and everything on it, and then I showed you a picture last night from about 6 p.m. So still 100-something degrees outside. Yeah. And in that pen, there's 2 pigs in the pen. Robbie sent it to me. He's like, hey, thanks for fixing my camera, but you left some hogs behind.
And these hogs had to bust through the fencing just to get in that pen. So they did some damage, and that's kind of what we're talking about here. The damage they do to the environment and costs people money.
Exactly. So very, very important to get them out there. And if you have such a big hog population too, they will come in like you saw, like clockwork, every morning coming to that feeder. Yep. Well, if deer and pigs, they'll live in the same environment, but they don't live with each other, obviously. So if a deer comes in that morning and sees that there's pigs under the feeder, deer's going to go somewhere else. Right. So pigs can pressure deer out of areas potentially if they're too invasive. So yet another reason as deer hunters to get them out of there.
So the fence was meant to keep the hogs out and just to allow the deer in.
Yeah, exactly.
So one thought I had too was that, like I said, Michigan, we've hunted hogs up in Michigan, but on game ranches. And to me, the challenge is still there because I've hunted on 700-acre ranches. And I told Sam the other pig hunt I went on, we went out before sunup, and it took us most of the day to even get on a hog. So it's still a challenge in terms of the chase and that sort of thing. But in terms of their feed, they're constantly being fed farm food. They're being fed corn. They're being fed hay. They're being fed, you know what I mean?
Right.
Whereas out here in the wild, you don't really know. And I think that's where the stereotype comes in. What's wild hog meat like compared to store-bought meat?
Right.
And so even this game ranch hog, you kind of wonder that as well. I can tell you that game ranch pig that I shot was some of the best meat I've ever eaten. And we actually pulled some pork loins out that we bought at the store and compared it to the pork loins from the hog off the game ranch. And the pork loins from the store were completely white, and the pork loins from the hog from the game ranch were a little darker in color. And when you tasted them, man, the store-bought ones just tasted like water compared to the game, the one from the game ranch. And so I'm super excited. And that was the one thing I said to Heather yesterday. I'm like, the meat looks awesome. I go, when we get home, we're going to take one of those back straps, we're going to throw it in the crock pot, and we're going to make a roast out of it. And I'm just so excited to taste it. And,
yeah. That was going to be my next question is, what do you think of the meat? Because like I said, so many people are like, only eat the sows or only eat the young ones. Boars are nasty. Mm-hmm. Again, this is a younger boar. It's a 150-pound pig, roughly. And I agree with you. Every experience I've had so far out on this property since we've killed pigs, I've yet to kill or clean a smelly, nasty hog. Now, granted, they walk through mud, their feet, their bellies, they might be muddy or something like that. I know my dad's pig that he shot last year, it had some mud on it, but I'm also dealing with guys who have made clean shots. Yep. So you're not dealing with gut shots. Yep. Gut shots, that can be nasty. That can be nasty on a deer.
Yeah, but with any animal.
But the meat, to me it has seemed very, very
clean,
usable. Yeah, for sure on these pigs. And what better way to fill your freezer, especially year-round in Texas? For sure.
Like I said, we're excited, and you get a sense of what the meat's like, regardless of what type of animal. You and I had this conversation about some deer that had been injured, and you try to butcher it, and you get a sense of, man, I don't know if this deer is very good at all. It's got a different smell. It's got a different look, so on and so forth. And so you can tell when how good the meat is simply by just taking a look and smelling. And this was just clean, fresh meat. And I told Heather I'm super, super excited to get this thing, cook it up, and start eating it. So yeah. So
well, very cool. Yeah, I'm glad you got to have a good experience and got to have a good hog hunt down here, and do something that you've wanted to do. glad we made that opportunity come true, and thank you for helping me with my cameras too after the fact, dragging you around the heat a little bit for some trail cam checks.
It was all fun, and like I said, the hog hunt was not expected at all, but when you mentioned it, I was all on board. Yeah, let's do this. Let's get it done. So, yeah. And like I said, the first day I was just kind of taking it all in until that hog snuck up on us, and then it got real quick.
Yeah, real quick. So, it changes like that. And I mean, we talked about that last night. How that's part of hunting, and something that we love is just it changes in a split second. You go from relaxed to adrenaline pumping, and something's about to go down.
Yep. And so that second day, I kind of went into it with more of we get an opportunity, we got to make sure we connect, and so that was kind of my focus. And the funny thing is, like I said, I was posting content to our page when Sam was like, Todd, I'm like, wait, I got to hit send.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Well, speaking of content, one thing, and I know we're gonna stack up a couple podcast episodes here consecutive on our publication schedule with you, because we, like I mentioned at the beginning, we just did an episode with your wife, Heather, about kind of y'all's life and her specifically hunting up there in your neck of the woods. I want to talk to you about the same stuff, but we're going to do that in its own podcast by itself. So probably the next episode. But you're not just here for the hog hunt, like you mentioned. You came down to record in person, hang out, get to meet and socialize and kind of know each other a little bit. But last night, we kind of kicked off a new series. It may, at this point, it may or may not be on our channel yet. It will for sure be in our editing room at this point. Sure. But so coming soon at the least. But tell us a little bit about this new series that you and I filmed the first episode for.
So it's called Couch Chats, and it really came from, like I said, the best ideas come from camp. When you get to meet people in person, meeting you in person, Fall Obsession as a whole, we're just one big family, and we mentioned it with the snow goose hunt. Sam and I, again, when we first met in person, again, we've known each other for years. It's like we've always hang out together, and so it's kind of cool. But Couch Chats really came from that snow goose camp, and every night when we would come in, we'd sit on the couch with different staffers. Myself, Andy, and I think Delaney were the first night, and second night was myself, Heather, Andy, and we tried to get Tyler. We wanted to feature his luscious mane there. So,
which has been a topic of conversation for even people outside of Fall Obsession. When I did the radio show, they were commenting on Tyler's glorious mane right there. Don't ever shave it, dude.
Yeah, no way. I tease him about he has no hair on his head. It's just so I tease him all the time. All your hair used to be up here, and all you did was just whoop go down. Right? So, but Tyler was more comfortable doing the directing and telling us how we need to sit and how we need to talk and that sort of thing. So, thinking about those times, I thought, man, what if we had a series where people just sat around and just talked about random things? There's a direction, but just to get to know people in person, and it's way more laid back. I know here on the podcast we have a little more structure, but Sam and I recorded the first episode last night, and it just flowed. We just talked about things, we talked about hunting, we talked about just random stuff, and as we were talking to each other, we developed more questions in our head and just kind of asked each other the questions. And my vision is hopefully we can incorporate some audience participation as well, and as we're recording these, maybe somebody from who was watching decide, they give us a question, and we each go around, just answer the question, and just go from there, and just talk about ourselves and who we are, so people get to understand where we're coming from, and the staffers that make up Fall Obsession, and our philosophies on life in general.
It's similar. It's a similar feel, a little bit more laid back, I feel like, than our podcasts. And like I told you last night, it's not. We're just going to take advantage of opportunities as they come. It's not going to be something where every single Monday or every single weekend, whatever it might be, we have to post another couch chat. Like we do a podcast every single Monday. That's our podcast schedule. We stay to that. More laid back than that. Right. But like you just mentioned, taking advantage of these opportunities that all these staffers are together, taking advantage of you and I just hanging out after dinner last night. Yep. Talking and everything before we went to bed. Yep. So much good stuff can come from that. So they're going to be videos. That it won't be published on podcast apps or anything. It's going to be on our YouTube channel. Again, Fall Obsession Couch Chats, I think, is kind of what we're going to call it.
Yep.
I imagine Todd will probably be in a lot of them, but it's not. There's no designated host, I guess. It's just going to be kind of whoever within our own staff and our own network has the opportunity to sit down and hang out and talk for a little while. So there'll be some probably a lot in the Midwest, where you're at, and then up north with Drew and Andy, down here in Texas with me and Nick. There's going to be plenty of opportunities to do stuff like that. Again, more laid back than the podcast, and then, like you mentioned, we want to incorporate listeners and viewers into it.
Right.
So I can see it going to like Facebook Live or something like that, to where we actually put out for our listeners, hey, we're going to be recording a couch chat live on this day at this time on Facebook Live. Video will be up on the YouTube after the fact, but chime in, give us some feedback, give us some topics, give us some questions live on Facebook, as we record. So.
And my original vision was Wayne and Garth sitting in their basement just talking about random stuff. I'm like, yeah, we got to be a little more, cautious about what we talk about.
A little more PG than that.
Yeah, exactly. But we got to get you and your wife on too, Sam. I mean, at dinner last night, your wife was talking about how she loves to go out to Texas dirt and fish the ponds and that sort of thing. And I remember I made a comment saying, hey, this is a couch chat right now.
Yeah, exactly. And man, that's so many times we've had opportunities like that where that has been my exact feeling. And one that comes to mind, and it's come up in our conversation since you've been here a few times, but when we did our giveaway hunt last year with Mark Zorich, veteran hunter, we brought him out here, and there were so many, like, we filmed a My Obsession episode and everything with him, but there were so many times that it was like, man, I need a camera rolling right now. Or me, him, and Waylon just sitting at camp, just kind of, having a beer and whatever, and just sitting there hanging out. And it's like, man, we need something rolling right now. Like, I wish we had this idea sooner, because that would have been an amazing couch chat with that guy,
Yeah.
So I love it. I love the idea of taking opportunities like that and putting it out there for, some people, I get it. Some people might not have the patience or the time to sit there and watch, an hour-long video, guys hanging out, talking, hunting on the couch. But, I mean, the way I see it, it's going to be a video. Plug it in while you're doing something else, have it playing in the background, even like you do with these podcasts, listen to it when your earbuds while you're at work or whatever it might be,
And it's real hunting, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
real. So I was telling a story last night about a deer I thought I put a really good shot on, and turned out it wasn't as good a shot as I thought, and I was describing a little more in detail, just because that's what I try to do. I try to let people visualize exactly what was happening, and then Sam made the point that, hey, this is real. I mean, this is what we deal with, but this isn't us. And so this isn't us wholly, you know what I mean? There's more to hunting than just this part.
Right, exactly.
And so sometimes as we're talking, we'll come up with stories like that, but that's the whole purpose of Couch Chat, to get to know who you are as a person, as a hunter, as an outdoorsman, as, in life and out in the woods, and so on and so forth. So
Well, like I said, man, I'm excited to see where it goes, and I encourage our viewers or listeners, however you're tuning into the podcast today, to go to our YouTube channel if you haven't already, and be sure you subscribe and turn those notifications on. That way, when we publish our first couch chat or future couch chats, it'll pop up and you guys can tune in. So it'll be fun.
Sounds good. And bow fishing, we leave a week from tomorrow for southern Indiana. We have a group from the Midwest going down to southern Indiana for a bow fishing trip hosted by Delaney Pfeiffer. And, Delaney and I have had several conversations, and we pretty much agreed. Let's roll the cameras the second we get there, and I'm sure we'll have a lot of content coming in.
Absolutely.
So.
Well, Todd, I'm gonna wrap up this first podcast. We're not done. We're gonna keep recording, and in our publication schedule, we're gonna have an episode with you next week, talking about kind of piggybacking off of Heather's episode, talking about what you guys got going on up there in Michigan, some of your hunting experiences up there. We might talk a little whitetail scouting up there, and then we'll talk a little bit more too, probably about our Fall Obsession staff, the family atmosphere, and kind of the team aspect that you've built as a staff coordinator up there.
Absolutely.
So, but I'm looking forward to it. We'll get into all that with the next podcast.
But sounds good.
But for our listeners' sake, thank you guys for listening to the podcast. Thank you for watching. If you're watching the podcast video, if you are a listener on whatever podcast app you might be listening on, be sure you hit that follow, subscribe button, whatever it might be. We are on all major podcast platforms, as well as Waypoint TV. That's a free hunting and outdoor streaming app. Basically, you can download on your phone. It has hunting shows, podcasts, educational series, all sorts of different stuff from hundreds of different organizations on there, and it's free. So be sure you go download the Waypoint TV app and follow Fall Obsession. Our podcast episodes, like I mentioned, are also on our YouTube channel. So be sure you head over to the YouTube, subscribe. We got a bunch of other stuff coming out, including we're about to launch our season 2 of Texas Dirt, which I'm super excited for that series, one that's near and dear to my heart. So be sure you go check out the YouTube. Fallobsession.com is our hub. That's the place you guys can go to find all of our content. At this point, we built a custom website that we can share everything on. And at this point, we cover hundreds of different topics in the outdoor world from all over the country. You know, I put in stuff relevant to Texas. Todd and Heather have put in a lot of content relevant to their area, Michigan, the Midwest, and so on and so forth with all of our staff members. So be sure you go over there, explore around, check out the apparel too. I don't know if you can see it in the podcast video with the laptop, but I'm rocking the Bear Country t-shirt, and then we got hats like what Todd's wearing and everything on our website as well. So we also do a deal of the week where we're trying to combat the rising prices in today's economy and everything, and basically pick a different apparel item every single week, mark it down to $10, and sell it at $10 just flat for the week. So if you guys want to check out the deal of the week, head on over to fallobsession.com or our social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I already said YouTube, all that stuff. We're also on Go Wild app, which is a free social media app for hunters and outdoorsmen, censorship free as well. So you can post whatever you want on there, and they're not going to get you in trouble for it or anything. And they also have a pretty cool reward system that you build up points as you post more, and you can earn rewards and product and gear and all sorts of cool stuff through them. So, and again, it's free. So go check out Go Wild. Last but not least, Ridge Rock Hunt Company. They're the podcast sponsor. We love Derek and Lacey over there in Mississippi. They are a third-party agency that books hunts for outfitters, and all the outfitters in Derek's network are vetted and trusted outfitters, so he guarantees a good experience. Give him a call no matter what you're looking to hunt in North America. He's got something in his network, and he can try to fix you up for something in your price range. If it's out of your price range, he can help you formulate a plan in years coming with tags and draw results and stuff to help plan that hunt out for the future as well. So head on over and check out Ridge Rock Hunt Company. Todd, I enjoyed it, man. We'll do another one here in a little bit, but appreciate you not only coming on the podcast, but flying down to Texas to come on the podcast.
I appreciate you and your wife and your hospitality, and just letting me experience this. This was just so awesome. So
yeah. Well, it's good to have you. More to come. So,
yeah, for sure.
All right, guys. Thank y'all for listening, and we'll be back again next week with y'all and Todd for another Fall Obsession podcast episode. We'll catch you then.
Stay obsessed, y'all.